Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia Missing, available on Amazon, coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia, double suspense, double the fun. Check it out, coming soon on Amazon. Also, Mike Wagner Show is brought to you by Illuminatical, think tank of the future. The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, now on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist, Serena Wagner. Also brought to you by High Time Music. Check out the latest at hightimemusic.com. We're here with an amazing award-winning journalist, currently in Cambridge, Massachusetts, contributor to the Washington Post, worked at Wall Street Journal, and a health reporter at WBR Radio in Boston. Also written about health and medicine for more than 2 decades, and also published in numerous media outlets, and received her MS from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and a bachelor's from South Lawrence College, or Sarah Lawrence College, and also has a new book out about a state trooper appearing at her door to report her husband jumped to his death off a nearby bridge, unable to absorb the news and no history of mental illness, and having to explain to her daughters about it. It's basically about just a book, which is Us and After. We're getting more into that. Live, ladies and gentlemen, Plus Dues in beautiful downtown Cambridge, Massachusetts. You are a winning journalist and contributor to the Washington Post, currently in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with the book Us After. Ladies and gentlemen, multi-talented Rachel Zimmerman. Rachel, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Mike.
Well, it's great to have you on board. You're an award-winning journalist and contributor to Washington Post. You worked at Wall Street Journal and health reporter at WBR in Boston. You've written about health and medicine for more than 2 decades. Your works were published in numerous media outlets. You received your master's from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism and a bachelor's from Sarah Lawrence College. And you got your new book about examining domestic devastation and the struggles of when a state trooper came by and said their husband jumped to death off the bridge, and examining domestic devastation, resurgence, struggle between public and private selves, shifting perspectives, work of motherhood, secretly keep, and it's called Us After, a memoir of love and suicide. Before getting all that, Rachel, tell us how it first got started.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, and I actually was not involved in journalism in college, but after school, I was working in book publishing, and then I was writing book reviews for the San Francisco Chronicle. I was out in California, and I got a job at a tiny little newspaper in Hollister, California. And from then on, I really wanted to become a journalist. And I worked my way up the chain, eventually working at the Wall Street Journal in Seattle, and then in New York, and then in Boston. And once I started in New York, I started covering healthcare. First, I was covering pharmaceuticals and the high cost of drugs.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's a
then,
hot topic.
yeah, and then I started covering more general health and medicine and women's health, healthcare policy. And then, I worked for the public radio station in Boston, also covering healthcare. And then in 2014, my husband, who was a professor at MIT, died by suicide. And as you said, he had never been diagnosed with any kind of serious mental illness. He was very high functioning. We have 2 daughters. They were 8 and 11 years old at the time. And he was close to his family and he had these students who loved him. And so it really felt like a shock. And so suddenly, my reporting, I was the story, right? Like I was the story, and my family, needless to say, was devastated. As you mentioned, a cop came to my door to tell me that he had died, and I had, by that time, about 3 or 4 hours before I had to give that news to my children who were at day camp. So it
Mm.
was devastating. But as a reporter, my first impulse was to dig and try to figure out what happened to him because, he wasn't the typical profile of someone who is suicidal, right? When we think of people who die by suicide, we think of, long-term depressives. We think of people who are socially isolated, who do not have strong social networks, who perhaps have long-time addictions. And none of that was true with Seth. And so, as a friend of mine said to me, it was like he had a PhD in hiding. And I think he had this persona that was the outward self, where he was very successful and fun loving. He played ultimate frisbee. He like had this bubble mix that he kept in his car so he could like make bubbles if he ran into a bunch of
Oh,
kids.
I love to have one of those things. Now you mention it, especially holiday time. You're giving me some really good ideas
Anytime,
here.
anytime, yeah. And then internally, he had demons, obviously. And so, the book is about me first trying to figure out what happened and talking to experts and suicide researchers and doctors. And ultimately, while I learned a lot about suicide and how it's kind of this tunnel vision and you're not thinking about anything else about how except how to end the pain. I learned about that sort of aspect of suicide, but I didn't ultimately figure out why, because like suicide is so incomprehensible because it violates our basic nature to survive. And so at a certain point, I had to sort of pivot from, focusing all of my attention on what happened and trying to live my life and trying to provide some joy and pleasure again to my kids.
Hmm. Right. Yes. And of course, you're talking about demons as well, too, being possibly possessed. What type of demons do you think were possessing your husband
Well,
Seth?
I
Or
don't
like,
think, I mean, I don't mean demons literally. I mean depression, um, and mental illness. I mean, so suicide is very stigmatized still, and people say to me often, "Oh, that was such a selfish act," right? But what I've come to learn is, suicide is the end result of a mental illness, right? And so just like if you have cancer, nobody says that this person committed cancer or they were selfish because they had cancer, right? They had an illness. Their cells ran amok, right? And so similarly, you have an illness in your brain, and for some people that sadly leads to self-harm and sometimes suicide. So
mhm.
that's the kind of demons I meant metaphorically, not I don't think he was possessed by actual demons, on the contrary.
Yeah, we just want to get that clarification as well, too. And do you think there was any signs of PTSD or maybe like an early trace? Like, did something happen in his childhood that affected him greatly? Because, now with PTSD being out in the open, even the smallest ones, like say you fall off your bike, that's a little tiny PTSD. Or like say a cat scratched you, that's a little PTSD. Like maybe or some of the
Well,
little things that
yeah,
maybe affected it.
yeah. I spent many years thinking there would be one of those things. And honestly, I didn't find any. I mean, he grew up with two brothers, his parents are still married. We're very close with them still. He grew up in Connecticut. He, went to college, went to grad school. I mean, as far as like getting scratched by a cat, I don't I don't think any of that happened. And there were no signs of PTSD. As I said, he was a brilliant, moody guy. So he had his highs and lows, but like, so don't we all?
Right.
And
Yeah. I was
again,
using scratching a cat as just an example.
I,
So,
I see. Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, he did not fight in any wars. He was not, there were nothing that I discovered in my research pointed to any PTSD, which is again why it's so incomprehensible. I think he had deep depression and perhaps undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and
hmm.
he kept it in check and just sort of, he had very high expectations of himself, and again, I think he hid a lot of his depression so no one could see it until he couldn't hide it anymore.
I see. And that was about 2014 when that was not ever mentioned. And that's becoming more on the forefront. And do you think was that considered rare back then in 2014, or is it on the verge of becoming really prominent, or has it just been that common but has not been mentioned in 2014?
You mean as far as suicide goes?
With that PTSD, deep dark depression, just hiding it. That's what I was talking about.
I mean, I
2024 it's
think,
getting common, but 2014 that was like
right. I
a
mean, I think
rare
that,
thing. Even
right.
go
I
back to like
mean,
past 2000.
yeah. I mean, I think suicide has been around for many, many, many years throughout civilization, right? And I think, there are a lot of factors in terms of hiding your illness, right? Like, I think there's some gender components at play. In other words, I think men are still told like they're not supposed to show their feelings. They're supposed to pick themselves up by the bootstraps and,
Or chin up,
suck it
don't
up,
cry,
chin
man up.
up.
Yes.
Exactly, exactly. And so he definitely had a lot of that. And so I think that, he had a couple of other things that were happening near the end, which were he was about to turn 50 and he had some sciatica. So he had some pain, chronic
Ooh.
pain. And so he couldn't do exercise. He played ultimate frisbee. That was his form of exercise. So he couldn't do that. His sleep had deteriorated really dramatically right before he died. So he wasn't sleeping. He did have a thing called tinnitus, which is a ringing in the ear that was very mild and hadn't bothered him. And he felt like that had escalated. And he was in the middle of a big work competition. He was a robotics professor, and he was involved in an international robotics competition that he really wanted to win. And Seth, when he wanted, he was a competitive guy, and when he focused on a work thing like that, I sort of was like, you have tenure at MIT. It doesn't really matter if you win this competition, and he would have none of it. He wanted to be at the top of his game. And I think the internal pressure that he put on himself was something that really made it impossible when he started becoming anxious and agitated and the depression started to come up, he didn't know how to manage it. And I think he didn't have the coping skills. So, but again, it's quite mysterious still.
Hmm. I think you're bringing a lot of this out in the forefront, Rachel, you being a journalist and everything like that. And I think it's really coming into play. We'll talk more about the book, Us and After, especially with mental health, healthcare, and everything like that, how to cope. But first, you listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com. It's powered by SonicWeb Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking a budget. SonicWeb Studios is the answer. SonicWeb Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. It takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love you to first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has got great reviews. And Evil Love and Enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for It Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon to Amazon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia, double the suspense, double the fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also, Mike Wagner Show is brought to you by Illumnific, think tank of the future, bring scientists and engineers together from all over the world, creating a method to construct a renewable generator. This unique product operates on a closed loop system that generates more energy than it needs to function. The extra electricity can be used to run everything from homes, power grids, phones, laptops, and this power source is renewable, highly scalable, and self-regenerating. Visit facebook.com/Illumiptical. That's ELLUMIMPITICAL.com today. And the Mike Wagner Show is brought to you by Sweet Summits by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, including 30 exquisite paintings and the in King David's Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives a new perspective of David through the Psalms he wrote and his time as a shepherd where it started, and complicated yet turbulent relationship with King Saul. It's a story of love, repentance, betrayal, hope, and more. Check it out, The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Also brought by High 10 Music, featuring a smash hit, Baby Come Back. And check out the new music coming soon. Listen for tales at high10music.com. Also, check out The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on 40 podcast platforms, heard in 100 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. Make sure you subscribe on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Spotify, Spreaker, and more. And also support The Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and themikewagnershow.com for great gift ideas. Go to Amazon.com. Check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast, T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com. Check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson for great books like Missing, Once, Wrinkles, cool merchandise, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson. Check it out today. We're here with the amazing award-winning journalist and contributor to the Washington Post, worked at Wall Street Journal and Health Report at WBR in Boston, Rachel Zimmerman with the book Us and Us After here on the Mike Wagner Show. And before you get back to more of your book, you've been doing some health reporting for about 20 years. And how did you first get interested in reporting for health?
Well, as I mentioned, I was a book editor after college, and I got asked to write some book reviews, and I loved writing those for the San Francisco Chronicle. And then I got a job at a tiny little newspaper in Hollister, California, and I just really got into reporting the news. I mean, it was a small town. Like I covered city council meetings, and like the counselors had their guns with them, and there was a lot of small town politics and you know, factions and development crises. And, it was a little California town. And I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, New York. So it was pretty interesting for me. It was like being in a foreign country, Hollister, California. Then I moved back to the East Coast and went to graduate school, and then ended up in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, working my way up in papers covering politics. And then, of course, healthcare and politics collide often. And so that's when I really got into health because, it affects all of us so profoundly, whether it's healthcare policy and your insurance coverage, or the medications you take, or access to healthcare, or, and then when I had kids, I got really interested in maternal health and children's health. So it just, so I've been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, mostly I cover mental health because of what I've been through and just learning a lot. And I just wanted to go back to something you asked me about, like it's more talked about now, and it wasn't so much then. I think we've been talking about mental health for a long time, but I think COVID really forced the issue in that we had to confront so many deaths and so much illness. And it took such a toll on our collective mental health that I think people started talking more because it was right there in front of us. And so I think that's healthy. And part of the reason that I wrote the book, here it is to,
Oh, feel free to show it for our viewers.
Okay,
So feel
here it
free to show
is.
it.
Us After, a
Get
memoir of love
closer.
and suicide. Well,
There you
here it
go.
is.
There you go. I love it when you show
Well, yeah,
books
I
very
figured,
often.
yeah, because you're showing books and pillows, so I thought I would too. But
Hey,
the
it
point
sells. Why
is,
not? So,
right, right. I really wrote this. A lot of people are like, oh, it was such a devastating ordeal, the suicide of your husband and your children were so little. Like, why would you write this and get back into it? And honestly, I did it to, first of all, to show that pe people go through trauma, right? And loss. Everybody, almost everybody has gone through something, maybe not what I've gone through. And I think it's healthy to share these stories. And when we start talking and sharing and talking about suicide and mental illness, becomes more acceptable and people know that they can get help. Since I've been doing these book events around the country, so many people have come up to me and said, "Oh, somebody died by suicide in my family, but we weren't allowed to talk about it. It was kept secret. We took all the pictures off the walls and that was it." And, they've been holding these secrets for years. And to me, that doesn't serve families or anybody to hold on to these secrets. I think so. Hopefully, this triggers a conversation, and people can be more open and talk about it.
And plus, support groups have been on the rise as well too. It once used to be a stigma, kept secret, and not on the public. And now support groups have been on the rise, and people are open to talk about it and be more encouraged these days.
Yes, my 11-year-old, so we found a support group for kids and families who have lost loved ones. And my 11-year-old went to one session and they were doing an art project with pipe cleaners or something. And she's like, "No way am I going to go back to that. I don't want to do that." But my 8-year-old was really into the pipe cleaner art project.
Pipe cleaners, oh my
And
gosh, I love playing with those things. It's like
I
a
know.
flashback. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so this the way this worked is like they take the kids downstairs and the kids wouldn't talk about grief or anything. They do their art and or they jump on trampolines or like they paint rocks or whatever. And the grown-ups would go upstairs and talk. And my 8-year-old afterwards said, "I really thought this was helpful because I thought I was the only one who ever lost a dad, but actually there are other kids who have gone through this too." So I really think figuring out that we are not the only ones who have gone through this is very helpful and therapeutic.
Certainly does as well too, and of course, with you being a widow for quite some time as well too, that it used to be a stigma as well. How's that changed the meaning of a widow?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think that we have this idea of widow from popular culture, right? It's like this long suffering woman who wears like black turtlenecks and, has no joy ever again. But that's not reality. And in fact, 5 years after Seth's death, I remarried. And uh, about 1 year after his death, a friend of mine said to me, "Do you want to have coffee with a guy?" And I just thought, "Oh, it's too soon, and I'm not ready, and I don't know how to date anymore." But we went and had coffee, and there was some chemistry, and we just like went on a few dates, and it was very slow. And at the beginning, I thought, like, is this even allowed? Right? I thought I was breaking my marriage vows with my husband, but obviously I wasn't. But I had internalized all of that cultural baggage about like what widows are allowed to do. And, I really didn't want my kids to ever think that their dad would be ever replaced. So the relationship proceeded very, very slowly. And again, it wasn't until 5 years after Seth's death that we got married. And so my current husband has a daughter who's 6 months older than my oldest daughter. So we have the three girls. And, I'm not saying it was easy to blend our families or to move forward, which is really you move forward, you move back, you get better, you get sad. Grief is not totally linear, but we created this new family and the girls now call each other sisters and they're all two of them are still in college, one just graduated. And it is kind of amazing because on the day Seth died, my older daughter said to me, "Mom, will we ever be happy again?" And I said to her, "Yes," but I completely didn't believe it. I thought, like, how can kids get over this? How would I get over this? But as humans, I think that I hate the word resilience because I think it's overused, but I think we are more resilient than we think. And, that is also the reason to put out this book to show people who are have just gone through some kind of loss or, are in the midst of it still that you feel like you'll never get better. You'll never feel better. You'll be so devastated with grief and anguish. But we do get better and we do go on. So I
Hmm.
really wanted to convey that message.
Hmm. One thought that popped in my head about the death of Seth and then you remarrying as well too. That is it okay for kids like to say, compare what your dad did to the current dad and everything like that. Is it healthy to do so these days, or is it you have to still be cautious about it without really hurting people's feelings, treading everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing with my kids, you know, we always had a policy of like they could ask me anything and we could talk about anything, and that has continued. And they know that my current husband is not their father. We talk about their father a lot, like there are pictures of him all over. And my youngest daughter graduated from high school in the spring, and we talked about he would have been so proud of her. And, you know, she plays ultimate frisbee just like he did. And so I think they're very clear that the man that I am married to now, is not their father, but he is a very loving and devoted person. And actually, by the time we married, I think my kids were actually kind of happy because they felt like they didn't have to take care of me anymore, right? Like they're off the hook and someone else has to take care of me. And so, yeah, no, I think it's a good question though, because what are the roles and what there's so many feelings, but I just really, when Seth died, that my girls and I became this kind of unit, and we were very close and very attuned to each other's needs. And they're 8 and 11 is very different developmentally. And so often we think of our kids as one thing. And I did that, but then I realized like they needed different things at different times. And, my younger kid wanted many more details. Like she wanted to know exactly how he died and what was happening and what time was it and stuff like that. Whereas my older daughter really didn't want details. She wanted to remember him in the way she had in her head and didn't want to talk about that. And those are just two examples of how they're really different people and need different things. And I had to learn how to listen to them. And similarly about getting married too. Like I really wouldn't have done it if it would have caused them grief and pain. But it was it was a celebration in some ways that we had all survived.
And what are some of the current do's and don'ts that you establish when it comes to death, like with your husband and everything like that? What are some of the do's and don'ts that take place today, unlike 10, 20 years ago? What are some of the current do's and don'ts that you talk or don't talk about?
I mean, I think one of the really strong messages is that it's a sign of strength to ask for help, not a sign of weakness. And so, if my kids are feeling overwhelmed for whatever reason, I encourage them to take a mental health day. And if their friends, sometimes they come to me and they say, "Oh, my friend is so stressed about this paper or that, or she's freaking out about this." And I just encourage them to like take a break, take a walk. Like I'm all about, I think we need to really practice self-care. And so I encourage them to talk about their feelings as much as possible. And they're also very close to Seth's parents and his family, and I think that's really important to continue the bonds um, with all of their cousins and aunts and uncles. And I will say one thing that really helped us is we had this amazing community of mostly like women friends of mine who were the mothers of my kids' friends.
Hmm.
And these women just like gathered round and they like brought us food and drove my kids to all of their gymnastics and play dates and
Nice,
birthday
very nice.
parties. And they picked up the phone in the middle of the night when I needed it. And so, so I kind of feel like even in our very unlucky situation, we were lucky with this community. And I also will say that there was some life insurance money that Seth left, so we didn't have
Ah.
to move. Like we could stay in the same house we had been living in, and the kids could stay at the same school and still do all their gymnastics classes. And so, we had financial security, and all of that made the pain and grief. It didn't change it, obviously, but it softened the hard edges, I would say.
And what else do you want your readers to get from the book? What else?
I think, some of the points that I mentioned, I want this to be the start of a conversation. I think suicide is very misunderstood, and people need to know that it's an illness in your brain, just like diabetes is an illness, and we don't have morality surrounding diabetes. But like, suicide in previous times was considered a crime in some states, and many religions still see it as a sin. And so there's a lot of baggage around it. And I think that, I wanted to put a lot of detail in this book because so many people said to me, I can't imagine what you've been through. And I wanted to give them a little bit of an imagining so that, again, it's not so mysterious and we can really start to help people in more effective ways when we better understand this illness. So I want people to take that away. And then really, um, the title is Us After, and that refers to, my kids and us after this terrible event we went through. But it also is about all of us because, as I've said, it's hard to become an adult in any part of the world without having experienced some kind of loss or trauma, and sort of what do we do as a society and as individuals to move on after we've experienced trauma. Oftentimes you just have to put one foot in front of the other and pretend that everything's okay until it is. And, people do that for their kids all the time, and spouses do it for each other. And I think we need to, help each other get through these traumatic times, by listening better and sharing our stories
Hmm.
around even difficult topics.
Hmm. And certainly, indeed, very important. And lastly, how can we help?
Well, I mean, we can have a whole nother discussion about the mental health system in the US, but I think mental health care has to be made more accessible, more affordable, just easier for people to get into because, again, this idea of like chin up and don't cry, that's very harmful. And I think it's the wrong message to be sending. And I think we can help by encouraging boys, but all kids. I mean, we're having a mental health crisis among children and teenagers. And I think there are a lot of factors, but one of them is fear of the shame of having some kind of mental illness. And I think that we really have to encourage kids to find trusted adults who they can talk to and share their fears with, so that they can get help.
And that's very, very important. We encourage everybody to get help as well. And a little bit more about the book, Us After with Rachel Zimmerman. We'll find out just 1 minute. You listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios, brought to you by official sponsor, The Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Wilson's Missing, available on Amazon. Also brought to you by Illuminati, Think Tank of the Future. The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, now on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner and High 10 Music. Check out the latest at high10music.com. We'll be back with award-winning journalist of Us and After, Rachel Zimmerman, after this time out. We're back with award-winning journalist and contributor to the Washington Post, Rachel Zimmerman, here on the Mike Wagner Show with Us and Us After. Where can we find your book at?
Well, you can get it anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. And then my website is my name, rachelzimmerman.net. So you can find all possible information on me and my book, and you can order it. There's a link through there, and you can actually send me feedback, and I'm happy to respond and listen to people and answer questions if they come up.
I will certainly do that as well. We're with Rachel Zimmerman of Us After here on the Mike Wagner Show, and just a few more things. What else can we expect from you in 2025 and beyond?
Well, I'm writing a bunch of articles and I'm working on another book. Um, Also about actually it's a novel, uh, which is a new venture for me, about mothers and daughters and inheritance of trauma and love. So that's what I'm doing, writing more. There's going to be a lot of mental health stories to cover this year. So that's going to be my focus.
And we're certainly looking forward as well. It just keeps it up to date on that. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Ooh, biggest influence. That's a really good question. I mean, I had a lot of books in my brain when I was writing this. Of course, the writer Joan Didion, who famously said, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And she wrote, The Year of Magical Thinking about the death of her husband. And then she wrote another book about the death of her daughter. And then a bunch of other writers. Elizabeth Alexander is a poet who wrote about the death of her husband. Megan O'Rourke has written a lot about illness and death and mourning. So I think just the writers I found most helpful were the ones who were able to take their tragedy and take their grief and sort of metabolize it into something beautiful and a piece of art and something bigger than their personal loss and connect it with their community. So I appreciate those writers, and they were really inspiring to this
Mm-hmm.
writing.
Uh-huh. And certainly, indeed, very helpful as well. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
To anybody on
Anybody in
anything?
general, I'm going to throw it out to you. General question, answer it however you want it.
Okay, I mean, given the current reality in the world, I think, you know, uh, being kind to others, and listening. I wish we listened to each other more and that there was a lot less hatred in the world because it causes so much pain and chaos and more trauma, which we do not need in this world.
That's certainly understandable. We don't need that, by the way. We're here with author Rachel Zimmerman of Us After here on the Mike Wagner Show. Rachel, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We love to have you back. Once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
My website is rachelzimmerman.net. The book is Us After, a memoir of love and suicide. You can get it on Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, any independent bookstore, wherever books are sold. You can get it on Audible, you Kindle, any format. And if you check out my website, rachelzimmerman.net, you can see other writing that I've done and you can send me comments, which I'm happy to respond to.
We will certainly do that as well. Once again, Rachel, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We love to have you back. We wish you all the best. And Rachel, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you so much. You take good care. Bye bye.